Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks again for joining and for your patience with our first session, which I inadvertently terminated after just 2 minutes. So welcome back and glad you're here. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Alan Taylor. I run our office here in California. I run the Investor Network program that many of you are familiar with, together with a great team here, and then also the Endeavor Catalyst Fund. We really appreciate your time and you being here today. I'm going to walk through a couple of concepts in the presentation about Endeavor Catalyst, but I do want to also really encourage you guys to ask questions. And so the format for that is the little Q&A feature you can see on the side of your Google Plus Hangout. And you should be able to type questions in there, and then they'll appear here for me to be able to respond to. Also, we learned from the last time we did this, it's best, I think, if you guys can look through the slides at your own pace. So if you have two windows open and can be looking at the slides and listening to my sort of voice and presenting, or for those of you doing this in a group, maybe you can have the video up on one screen and the presentation on another. That's what we have. So we're filming, coming to you live here from this computer, and then you'll see Nassim and our presentation is up on the screen there in the Endeavor California office. So we'll keep the video focused here and encourage you guys to walk through the slides with me. The goal is really to go through this in about 20 minutes and cover some of the content, and then hopefully be able to respond to some questions at the end. And I will not pause it because I know it will stop, but one thing you can do is put a little note that says, video has started, feel free to join. And then the viewers, I think, will come and join as we go. Does that make sense?
In the comments.
Yeah, in the comments. So you guys, we're doing this in quasi real time. I think you'll be about 2 or 3 minutes behind my presentation, but hopefully you can walk through the slides at the same pace. I see the viewers actually joining now. So this morning, I think we have a group in New York. You guys can clap and cheer for yourselves if you want. We have a group, I think 8 people joining from Buenos Aires, Argentina, which is great. 6 people in Colombia. And then I know some folks also in Egypt, in Jordan, I believe in South Africa, and 1 or 2 other countries. So the goal of this session is really to help remind, refresh, and really emphasize some of the key points about the Endeavor Catalyst Fund, which is our co-investment vehicle we set up just about 2.5 years ago. I did put together some short slides to share with you guys, and if you're looking at them, I think they're actually a helpful visual to explain some of these things. So actually, if you go to the first slide, you'll see a brief history of Endeavor Catalyst. Actually, I think helps kind of explain where this all came from and why we're doing it. So, as you guys know, Endeavor's been around 17 years. I think the idea for a fund or a co-investment fund is probably about 17 years old, but it became more of a real idea just 3 or 4 years ago, really when some of our best entrepreneurs, including the guys from Globant in Argentina, several of the companies in Mexico, a few of the businesses in Turkey, people really were asking us for, why can't Endeavor do this? Couldn't this be a part of the future sustainability of Endeavor worldwide if you guys could actually, in addition to great programs like Entrepreneur Give Back, invest a little bit of money into some of our rounds? So it's an idea that originally came from Endeavor entrepreneurs way back in the day. And then we have spent a lot of time with a lot of support from mentors, board members, et cetera, figuring out how can you actually do this in a way, that is mission aligned, that keeps everybody sort of incentives aligned, and really can be beneficial to Endeavor. So if you see on the little history slide, it really does, there's been a couple of phases for Endeavor Catalyst. We launched this in January of 2012. That was originally really just philanthropic capital. So the initial pool of money that we had to invest out of was pure donations. And it was about $10 million total that was donated from guys like Reid Hoffman and Piero Midyar and members of the Endeavor Global Board. But what we realized after about a year of making some of those initial investments was that we would need to raise more capital, and to do that, we would probably need another structure. So last summer, in July of 2013, we launched Endeavor Catalyst LP, which is a limited partnership. It's a venture capital or private equity fund, just like any other fund, but with some unique features to it. So in this case today, anytime we make an investment out of Catalyst, we're actually investing out of two different vehicles. We're investing out of the philanthropy, that's the donated money, and we're investing out of the LP fund, which I'll tell you guys a little bit more about the mechanics of that in a bit. The last thing you'll see on the slide is actually a new chapter that we're working on. So last November we underwent an analysis. Our lights went down, and here we're going to figure out how to turn them back on. We're so eco-friendly in California. I might try something to see. Oops, now we're in the dark. That's okay. Thanks for your patience. We're getting our new conference room figured out. Let's see if this will work to actually stand up for a minute. Oh, but the screen is just going to be like that, huh?
I think it's too bright.
It's too bright. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. I'll sit back down. Okay, so the last two things you'll see on this slide, actually the little scene of San Francisco looks good in the background there now. That's a painting, by the way, on the wall in our conference room. We're not like outdoors in the park. But in November of last year, we actually had the fund underwent a Mercer rating, and it received sort of the highest ratings in operational risk assessment and something called ESG. So it passed every single test of really being a professionally managed fund, which is exciting. And in this new chapter, we actually are piloting a project to raise additional capital for the future of Catalyst. There's something called Catalyst Affiliate, led by our board members, Matt Brown, Elliot Weisbluth, and Joanna Reese, across the private wealth platform called CASE that Matt manages. The important things for you guys to know for when you're talking about it, when you think about it, Endeavor has raised about $30 million total to invest. We've actually invested about $10 million already. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But of the 30, it really is about 1/3, 2/3. A third of it is in that original philanthropy vehicle. That's money people have donated to us. And about 2/3, about $20 million, is in the fund. Actually, if you go to the next slide, this is a great way, I think, to talk about kind of the other way to tell the history of Catalyst, which is in our investments. So we have been investing as we've been going here. Some people call this, flying the airplane while you're still building it and kind of putting the different pieces in place. But it's exactly what we've been doing. So the first 6 companies you see on the slide that we invested in during 2012 and the first half of 2013, starting with Globant in Argentina, but going through Peak Games in Turkey, all 6 of those companies we invested in just out of the Endeavor Catalyst Philanthropies, the donated capital. Since then, since we've had the fund online, we've been investing in every single business out of both sections. So you'll see on here, we're very excited that we've been able to make 19 co-investments already. We have made quite a few in Argentina, so I'm sure that room can clap and be excited. We've actually made 5 in Argentina, which is more than any other country. We've made 4 in Brazil. We've made 4 in Turkey. We've made a couple in Mexico. And we're actually very excited that we may be making our first investments in the Middle East. We're looking at a business in Jordan and another in Morocco as we speak. In all these cases, of course, Endeavor Catalyst is just a co-investment fund. So we can't lead any rounds. We can't actually drive any of these financings to happen. But what we do is we co-invest with great lead investors. And we're very, very excited. If you look at these 19 on the board, we've literally co-invested with Accel Partners, with Sequoia Capital, with General Atlantic, with Intel Capital, with really some of the best global investors out there. And it's been really great. If you guys have questions related to the investments we've made or anything on the first 2 slides, I'd encourage you to put them in the little question and answer session over here on the side. and we'll see if we can speak to them as we go. If you go to the next slide, though, it actually talks a bit about how and when Endeavor Catalyst actually invests. And this, I think, is really important, particularly when you're talking to entrepreneurs or investors in your country or other people about it. Catalyst is not a fund in the traditional sense. We don't go out and seek companies to invest in. What Catalyst really is a tool for Endeavor to co-invest in our very best businesses when they've already attracted outside capital, sometimes with our help through Investor Network and other programs. So, the important part there is we really are a passive rules-based vehicle, and we don't make any choices or sort of pick and choose when it comes to how and when we invest. We seek to invest in every single Endeavor company that fits the criteria that we've laid out. And so when we say it's criteria-based or rules-based investing, this is really what we mean. We will invest anytime an Endeavor entrepreneur is raising $5 million or more in a single round of financing from an institutional lead investor, from a qualified lead investor. So I'll break some of that down. First of all, this is only for Endeavor businesses. So it has to be an Endeavor entrepreneur that is in good standing with your local office, meaning they're participating in Give Back, you guys are happy with them, they're part of the community, etc. That's most of our entrepreneurs, but that's an important distinction. It's only for Endeavor companies that have been selected at an ISP. Unfortunately, this can't apply to candidates or people in the pipeline, etc. That said, once you are selected, you are eligible. So while we will probably invest mostly in companies we've been supporting for several years, businesses that have been recently selected by Endeavor at an ISP are eligible for Catalyst as well. $5 million or more is a threshold we've set really to just manage the kind of overhead of running the fund. In the future, we could change this to be a smaller threshold in terms of joining rounds of $2 or $3 million. But for now, and probably for the entirety of this first fund, which is the next 2.5 years, the rules will remain the same in terms of $5 million and up. And if you guys have questions about that, we can certainly talk about it. The last piece is that we seek to be in rounds with a qualified institutional lead investor, which is an exciting and important kind of piece of this, because we really are co-investing alongside some of the very best funds in the world. They could be international. In some cases, they can also be local. We've invested with Intel Capital Brazil, with Alta Ventures in Mexico, with Kazek, of course, coming out of Argentina. So those are all qualified investors as well. The point of that rule is to keep us out of rounds led by, say, somebody's uncle or a group of friends put together to lead a financing. The goal is to really be investing with professional equity investors. So we go to the next slide, and there aren't too many slides in this deck, but this one, we're going to use a couple slides to try to explain how Endeavor Catalyst actually works. And I'm going to look at the screen along with you just for a minute to kind of walk you through the different pieces of the process. So, Catalyst is, like I said, basically it's a vehicle that sits on top of Endeavor all around the world. It is legally separate from Endeavor, but the whole purpose of why it exists is to help Endeavor entrepreneurs and to help drive the future sustainability of Endeavor. So in a typical process, we actually, we invest in a company. That's the little star over on the left where it says number one. That's really where all of this starts. And that's where we really can use your guys' help, is making sure that all of our entrepreneurs all around the world understand what Catalyst is, how it works, and how it can be helpful to them in their fundraising. And this is actually a good point. Before companies invest, before we can make an investment, we obviously need the entrepreneurs to know about Catalyst and to understand how it works. And so, really the idea here is every single Endeavor entrepreneur is eligible for Catalyst if they're in good standing with you at their local office. And what they can do is essentially go out and tell investors, hey, I'm going to raise $5 million. If I find a lead investor, I've got $500,000 from Endeavor already committed. So that is really an important feature, I think, when we're talking to entrepreneurs about it. The second, part of the process is after we invest, we're going to continue to support that company throughout its whole life cycle, the way you see here on the screen, just the way we would otherwise, right? We're going to support them with mentoring. We're going to support them with all kinds of things. We'll then go through a process where hopefully the company someday down the road will have an exit. We will share those profits with the people who've invested money with us in the fund and with Endeavor. And the real goal is we'll take most of the profits and most of the earnings and we'll reinvest it into Endeavor and into Catalyst to invest in the next generation. So that's kind of the high level overview. In a second, I'm going to go one by one, sort of step by step through those different parts. But first a question, and thank you for the question. I feel a little bit like a TV game show host. Thank you for your question, Carmen. But it says second companies which are not selected in ISP, but they are Endeavor entrepreneurs, can they apply for Catalyst? Are they eligible for Catalyst? And the answer is yes. So it has to be an Endeavor entrepreneur. But in the case of a second company, that's where we really go to that criteria of, are they in good standing with their local office? So what we would do is we would ask the local office in Argentina or in Brazil or in Jordan, wherever you are, is this entrepreneur and this company in good standing? Are they participating in Give Back? Are they a part of the community? And if the answer is yes, then yes, absolutely, that business is eligible for Catalyst. Of the 19 investments we've made, 18 actually, I believe, are in first companies selected at ISPs. But you'll note that we invested in a business called Zappo, which is led by Wences Casares, who has actually been an Endeavor entrepreneur for over a decade. And Zappo is Wences's fifth company. So it is definitely something that we can do. To go back to the process just for a minute and explain the different pieces, if you guys go forward to the next slide, so it should be slide number 5, it says Endeavor Catalyst invests. This is actually probably the most important one to understand and the most important one for you, at least over the next couple of years, is understanding how and when do we actually invest. So I said we invest according to the criteria. And what we really seek to do is be a really, really easy passive co-investor that's easy for the entrepreneur and easy for the lead investor to include in the process. So we seek to invest on exactly the same terms. We don't negotiate different terms or anything like that. And what we really do try to do is invest up to $500,000 in every single round in which Catalyst is eligible to participate. So the original rules and the original idea was that we could invest up to $2 million. And so you guys may have even heard in some of those first businesses, we were able to make larger investments. But we then did the math again and figured out that, unless we raised a $50 million or $100 million fund, we wouldn't actually be able to invest as much in every single company. And so the goal is to be able to invest in all Endeavor businesses that qualify. And so we've capped this for now at $500,000 per investment, meaning if a business is raising $5 million, we can invest $500,000. If a business is raising $20 million, at this point in Catalyst life, the amount we can invest is also $500,000. So the participation there, the goal is to really just be a small part of the round and to support the entrepreneur and the lead investor. And if you guys have questions about that, we've learned a lot about how this actually goes down. Usually the entrepreneur will get a term sheet from the lead investor and then say, hey, we're raising $7 million. This lead investor is offering 5. We have a few existing angels or our current investors are going to participate, and we'd like to make some space for Catalyst. It is most effective when the entrepreneur is sort of advocating and invites us in, and then the other investors will actually let us in. But if you think about it, the real goal is to be in every single financing of $5 million or more led by an Endeavor entrepreneur. And so far, we're doing great. We're 19 out of 19. So we hope we can keep up that track record. If you go to the next slide to understand kind of what happens then and where the money goes, our expectation is that businesses where we're investing, they're not going to be overnight sort of IPOs or sales the very next year. We have an expectation that it will be between 3 and 7 years that we'll actually stay as investors in a company. We have one example so far, which is Globant from Argentina, where we were shareholders for about 2.5 years from the very, very first investment we made until the IPO this summer. So that's actually a little bit faster than we would normally expect. We think that we will be investors in the company for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, sometimes maybe even longer, before the company either does an IPO, which would be fantastic and will happen in some cases, or is acquired or is able to sell the business, at which point we will exit right alongside the other investors and hopefully realize a profit. The next slide talks about what happens with those profits. And I think this is actually a really interesting and important point. In most venture capital funds, when they make a great investment and Google buys the company for $1 billion, the people who make the money are the investors themselves. In the case of Catalyst, the whole goal here is to create wealth and create long-term sustainability for Endeavor. And so you'll see when we make an exit, assuming that the investment came out of the two different pools of capital, the philanthropy and the LP fund, the very first thing we do is that we do share profits on an investment by investment basis with the people from the LP. So those are all of our investors. We have about 85 investors in the fund, including Endeavor entrepreneurs and board members from different countries. The first time we have an exit out of a company where we've invested with the LP, they will start to get some of their money back. They're going to actually get their original capital they invested, plus a share of the profits. Now, this is where Catalyst is a little bit different, because at a normal fund, the LPs, the limited partners who invested in the fund, would actually get 80% of the profits, and the individual partners would take 20%. In the case of Catalyst, we actually flipped that. So they get their original principal back, but the investors in the fund, the LPs, they also get 20% of the profits back. We take 80% of the profits of anything we make with Catalyst, and we funnel it back into Endeavor. And the idea here is to really use it for the future sustainability of three things, right? Of the Endeavor global operation, of the Endeavor local country operations, and of Endeavor Catalyst itself. So if you actually want to know the legal nitty-gritty, we're actually able to take all of our profit and allocate it across to Endeavor Catalyst Philanthropy tax-free. So Endeavor gets all those gains and we put it into the philanthropy vehicle. We then distribute it. In the case where we have investors from the different affiliates, this doesn't have to do with where the investment was made, but where the investors or the LPs are from, we actually will share profits back with the individual countries. So we have a lot of investors actually from Colombia, from Argentina, from Turkey, from Mexico, from different countries. Anytime Catalyst has an exit on any of the businesses we've invested in around the world, a percentage of the profits is actually going to flow back to those affiliates because they're the source of some of our capital. What we're then going to do is use part of that to go to the budget of Endeavor Global, but we're going to use the rest of the proceeds to put into philanthropy to essentially reinvest in the next generation of Endeavor companies. If people have questions about that, feel free to ask. I know it's a little bit complicated, but I think the important thing to remember is, this is all set up to benefit Endeavor. And when we make money, the people who've given us money or invested in us in the fund, they're going to make their capital back plus a small share of the profits. We're going to take most of the profit and redirect it into Endeavor, is really the goal of Catalyst. If you go to the last slide, it really talks about how that works. And so, we do seek to reinvest the money into Endeavor entrepreneurs out of Catalyst Philanthropies. So the vision would be over time, Catalyst Philanthropies, that thing that started with $10 million in donations, that can actually grow and become almost like an endowment. So our vision here is we will probably need to raise a second fund, an LP type fund in a couple of years to have enough capital to run Catalyst over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years. But 10 years down the line, if we've had a lot of success and we've created some more Globants and some more Mercado Libres and some more Yemexipites, we will actually have created enough funding that will be able to run Catalyst out of an endowment, that is Endeavor Catalyst Philanthropies, where we will invest, We will then flow the money back around to share with the affiliates and global to help run the operations, and we'll take the remainder back in to sort of do it again. So it is a very virtuous cycle that could create an endowment, at some point, 10 or 15 years down the road, that could help fund a significant chunk of Endeavor's operations. So the last thing that we have in this deck, that's the whole cycle again on slide number 9. So if you guys have questions about any of that, please do let me know. The last thing we have is just an example of a case study for the business Scantech that we invested in this summer. And the reason we included this is, essentially, I think it's important to show that Catalyst is one of the services, one of the things we can do for an Endeavor company. It's not the only thing we do by far. So in the case of Scantech, they've actually been an Endeavor business for more than a decade, originally selected in Uruguay. It's a really great story because Raul, the entrepreneur, actually came to me back in 2006 and said, hey, I want to be the first business from Uruguay to raise money in Silicon Valley, which was absolutely not something that could be done at that point. We helped him raise money from a local investor in Chile in 2008. That was Austral Capital. We helped him with all kinds of services in terms of marketing support, EY fellows, EMBAs, etc. In terms of financing, we then went back in 2011 and helped him raise a round of money, actually from Sequoia Capital. So he did become one of the first businesses in Latin America to raise money from Silicon Valley, and certainly the first one from Sequoia, who's a very major player. So that was a very exciting thing. Raul's now on his Series C round this summer, and he raised $25 million, which is a big round. And as part of it, he said, hey, I want Catalyst in on this. We didn't have Catalyst when he raised the last round from Sequoia. So he said, I want them to be a part of this because it's important to me. It's part of how I even think about, giving back and helping Endeavor in the future. So I think it's really important to stress, we don't want to attract people to our selection pipeline that just see Endeavor now as, I can get money from Endeavor if I get into Endeavor, right? This is a small piece of all the services that Endeavor has to offer. But I think it's really an important one where we really do want to be able to invest in our very best companies and help support them as they go to the next level. That's the end of the formal presentation. I think there's just a slide that says, questions. I know you guys are watching this maybe a few minutes behind me. This is what I've learned about the broadcast and how it works. So I'll leave the video going just for a couple of minutes to see if people have questions. And we actually have about 5 more minutes till we're at our hour. And I apologize, we started a little bit late. But if people do have questions, a couple different things, you can certainly put them in the side here and I will address them. We're going to be making an FAQ document to share that actually we would love your help probably translating it into Spanish and Portuguese at some point so we can share it with Endeavor entrepreneurs. And you're welcome to email me at any time you want. And we can even set up a workshop, country by country just for your office if you guys want time on the phone. If you do a Google Hangout with, fewer than 10 people, we could actually just do one where you can ask questions directly. So that really, I think, is the end of the formal presentation. I'll wait just 1 minute to see if there's any additional questions. And maybe actually I can speak to 1 or 2 of the questions that come up a lot or that get asked a lot, which, tends to be things like, I'm raising $3 million. Does that qualify for Catalyst? The answer is no. The minimum amount of equity really is $5 million. But one important thing to note is that $5 million can include us. It can include Catalyst. So it really has to be a round of about $4.5 million or 4.55. Then if Endeavor does 10% and does 450,000, you're over the $5 million threshold. So that's something that people ask from time to time. I have a company in the pipeline that's really interested in Catalyst. Can we talk to them about it? Yes, absolutely. You can talk to people in the selection pipeline about Catalyst. We want them to know it exists. We want them to take advantage of it. Fundraising is a long process. So oftentimes a business will be talking to investors or looking at fundraising for 3, 4, 5 months. And if they're in our selection pipeline, we want them to know that if they go through their ISP and get selected, the very next day they are eligible to be a part of Endeavor Catalyst. Another question that comes up, sometimes people ask, well, do I have to have met my investors through Endeavor or through the investor network in order to have Catalyst participate? The answer is no. Of the 19 companies that we've invested in, about half of them have actually come through our investor network, through the events that we run, through the roadshows that we run. So Endeavor's been very involved with helping them in other parts of the capital raising. In about half the cases, the entrepreneurs went out and found their investors on their own, which is totally okay with us. They then came to us and said, hey, actually in most cases, the local staff came to us and said, hey, this business just got a term sheet. I think they're gonna raise money. How can we get Catalyst involved? So the process at that point is to actually get on the phone and talk to the entrepreneur. And that's something I'm happy to do with any of your entrepreneurs, to share with them how it works and how it actually can work for them. We have a very good one-page overview of Endeavor Catalyst. Again, we have it in English, and it may make sense to translate it into local languages in some of these countries. But it's a very good thing that we can share with entrepreneurs. I'll share it actually with you guys as a follow-up to this call. It's on Chatter, and we actually encourage entrepreneurs to send it to their lead investors, particularly if they don't know Endeavor already. It's a really easy kind of way for them to understand what it's all about. Yeah, so Carmen or New York is asking the question about the sort of threshold and the investment size. It says it's been brought up before, but people continue to ask if we will lower the $5 million eligibility requirement. The answer is that we can lower it in the future. It is something Endeavor can do. We will have to make that decision at the global board level. So it's a committee of the global board called the Sustainability Subcommittee that actually oversees Catalyst. So they help me run it on a day-to-day basis. And they're the ones who help set the rules and the criteria. So that committee has 5 members. Nick Beim from Venrock, Reid Hoffman from Greylock, RF Naqvi from Abraj, Bill McGlashan from TPG, and Joanna Reese. So the 5 of them, together with me and Linda, will have to make some decisions down the road around what to do with eligibility. Like I said, it's very unlikely that we will be able to change that in the next 2 years. So while we're still investing out of this first fund, it's very likely we will keep that $5 million threshold the same. If down the road we determine that we could serve more countries and more entrepreneurs through lowering the threshold, it is something we are open to doing. But for all intents and purposes, for you guys, for now, for today, the rules are pretty fixed and pretty simple. It has to be 5 million or more from a qualified lead investor, and Endeavor can invest $500,000. All those things could change in the future if we decide to sort of tweak the rules. But as long as we're investing out of this first fund, it will probably remain the same. I like the question. Thank you, New York. I'm trying to think of other things that people have asked a lot about or wanted to understand. Yeah, Nassim can ask one live from the room. Yeah.
How are the profits split between global and the local affiliates? Does it depend on what country the entrepreneurs themselves come from who have an exit, or is that kind of evenly split between the local offices?
Yeah, so Nassim is asking a really good question on the mechanics of the fund. I don't know if you guys could hear her, but basically, how are the profits split between global and the local offices? And this is an important one to explain, but the profits are split not according to where we invest. So all businesses all over the world are going to hopefully generate profit for Endeavor. We split the profits according to the source of the capital we're investing. And so what that means is, in the fund, which is about a $20 million fund, roughly half the money has been raised here in the United States, and roughly half the money has been raised around the world, largely with your guys' help. So it's, board members and Endeavor entrepreneurs from different countries who have participated. So what that means is when we have our first exit, and again, the example of Globant doesn't apply because it happened before when we were just investing out of the philanthropy. But as soon as we have our first exit in a business where the LP is invested, and we have 13 investments there already, we will return capital to our LPs according to their original investment size. So they get pro rata share of the invested capital plus 20% of the profit. The remaining 80% is literally split 50-50 between Global and the affiliates that have participated in the fund. And it's basically split on a percentage basis by who's invested the most in the fund, if that makes sense. So the math is a little bit complex, but if you think about that pie chart, essentially we're distributing the profits on our investment exactly according to the ratios of who's invested in the fund. So if that $20 million, if $1 million of it is actually from Lebanon, or $1 million of it is from Mexico, 5% of the 20, 1 out of 20, 5% is actually going to be distributed to those countries. So it can be a meaningful amount of money. Over the life of the fund, we believe that the affiliate offices that have, say, $1 million invested in the fund will probably get back as much as $2 or $3 million for their office over the lifetime. So that's over sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 years. The official life of the fund is 10 years. It's very likely we will be done before that. But I don't know, does that answer your question? Does it make sense? And thanks, it's a good question. Okay, I think with that, we are at about 9:05 here in California. So we'll sign off and end this video. We really do appreciate your guys' attention. We appreciate the questions. I hope it made sense. Para todos que estén en Colombia o Argentina o otra parte de América Latina, la próxima vez podemos hacer uno en español, si quieren. That's definitely something I'm happy to do, is do one of these in Spanish. We could do it in Portuguese too, but it wouldn't really be as good. And I'll need Nassim's help to do it in Arabic or a different language. So anyway, thank you guys for your attention. Please do email us, chatter us. You can chatter with the hashtag Endeavor Catalyst, but follow up if you have any other questions. And we look forward to working with you guys as we make more investments around the world. Also, for those of you who watched all the way to the end, stay tuned. We've made 19 investments so far. I expect we can announce at least 1 or 2 more before the end of the year, which would be really exciting to make Catalyst investments 20, 21, and beyond. And we will be investing in at least 1 or 2 new countries that we haven't invested in before in the next month or so. So thanks again for your time, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.